Hey, welcome back to the series about my 1972 Volkswagen. We're almost to the end of the engine, but I just found some footage that I thought I'd lost, and I want to go back in time to overview two things: getting oil in the main bearings and a piece of baffling around the oil cooler called a Hoover Bit. I hope you enjoy this video before we jump back into sequence at the end of the engine assembly.
Prepping brake drums for painting and pushrod tubes.
Front suspension is all done. All the brakes are put together. The fuel tank is all in. All the vent hoses are connected. We need to prep the engine and get it in, which means taking a bunch of it apart and putting in the pushrod tubes and get some oil in the top to flow through the passages, get to getting the engine all back together. This is the farthest apart the engine's going to get. It's been 14 months since I assembled the core of the engine, and when I had the cylinder heads off, I made sure that the lifters and the pistons were nicely oiled. But I want to make sure that the center, the main bearings, get some oil before startup. Here's the oil system. The output of the oil cooler goes to this gallery, which feeds all of the main bearings. I can put oil in there and lube up the main bearings.
With oil in the bearings, we start assembling the engine for real.
The oil cooler sticking up from the block. The fan shroud sits down here and directs air down through the cylinders, and then out through the oil cooler. The fan shroud fits over it like this. Here's where the oil cooler sits. Air from the fan comes here. The exhaust comes out here. So at the base of the oil cooler, the exhaust goes this way out. You have this gasket to prevent too much air going around the oil cooler. This thing right here, the baffle to prevent too much air from coming out the bottom, called a Hoover Bit from R.A. Hoover, I believe. For a couple of decades was a vintage Volkswagen expert on the internet. He got really cross with people who didn't put these into their Volkswagens because, of course, you're missing a piece of the baffling. This has two screws that fit into the oil cooler. This receives a screw on the back of the fan shroud, but then this piece is just sort of independent and it's a baffle. This joint is very delicate and it's very easy to break off. It was my original Hoover Bit and it just broke off. It snapped at this joint. So it sat there. I built this, which puts a metal baffle here. This was my attempt to reproduce the Hoover Bit. Here is a repaired Hoover Bit. So this is something that somebody welded back together. What I've got in the engine at the moment is a reproduction.
Made by
Awesome Powder Coats, Van Loo,
Ohio. As of March 2024, as I edit this, still in business.
That's what a Hoover Bit is, and it is important for the proper baffling of your oil cooler. Please do install it or install something equivalent. I think I'm going to modify this sheet aluminum Hoover Bit that I made, and then I can use them together. It basically fills in that gap. That's where the Hoover Bit goes. There's my final, slightly improved Hoover Bit. It only has one thickness of metal here, so that the bolts go on properly. It's got a little bit of clearance, but only barely. This doghouse stand holding these seals between this bit and that bit is extremely hard horizontally while also putting in the screws. I realized I need to take this off, put it on the bench so that I could set the seals horizontally and then get these bits and the Hoover Bits in. The oil cooler and stand is now assembled. You can see the white of the compressed seals, the new Hoover Bit and how it baffles. The end of the new Hoover Bit does not go past the end of this. Quick action shots of the fan shroud cooling flaps. So that's closed. That's wide open. And those are controlled by an air bath thermostat. And this end goes like that. I hope you enjoyed that video. The next videos are going to be about the fan shroud and getting the car ready for the engine to go in it, including the oil system, transmission Bowden tube, and the clutch cable. And then we'll finally get to the engine start, which I promise will be worth it. Please subscribe, stay tuned, work on your car if you can, know as much about your car as possible, and never stop figuring stuff out.